Hey folks, I'm JC from One Shot Adventures, and today I'm going to review the Moby Dick inspired Call of Cthulhu adventure Fathom Five, a single session horror adventure set way back when in 1847. In this moody adventure, the PCs play a crew of a rough and tough whaling ship who are desperate to make their fortune hunting on the seas. But what they find instead are elder secrets, madness, and likely a voyage that ends in doom. Now, those of you who have watched my channel before, you know that I'm a big fan of historical horror adventures. I think they do a great job making your players feel a little bit out of their element, which is key to a good horror adventure. So when I heard that there was a Call of Cthulhu adventure set entirely aboard a whaling ship, well, my interest was immediately piqued. And I'm pleased to say that Fathom Five will play startlingly different from other horror adventures. So, if this all sounds interesting, well, grab your harpoon, man the oars, and call me Ishmael, because not only am I going to give you a full review of Fathom Five, I'm also going to give you GMs some tips and tricks on how to run this one like a pro. Fathom Five is written by Paul Fricker. The adventure runs about 60 pages, but about half that page count is dedicated to full-on character sheets of the entire crew of the Barclay, the whaling ship that the adventure is set on. Fathom Five is designed to be run in just one single 4-hour session, which has made this a very popular adventure for GMs to run at game conventions, especially with its tight narrative, focus on role-playing over action, and high body count. The setup for the adventure is this. About 5 years ago, Captain Chappell discovered black spires protruding from the ocean somewhere in the South Pacific. This was Ryla, the sunken city where Cthulhu himself sleeps. But before he could explore the city, a storm took his ship away. Obsessed with getting back to the city, Chappell made a deal with the spirits of the deep that he would be allowed to return to Ryla if he sacrificed the lives of 3 of his crew en route there. Only he and 3 others aboard his ship know about this plot. The Barclay has 23 crew members, and virtually all of them can be used as PCs. With so many options, the adventure smartly gives advice for which characters players should really start with, depending on player count. I also encourage you to give each PC a backup character at the very beginning of the adventure, because this will make it a little bit easier for the player to attach to that new character should somebody die over the course of the adventure, which is pretty likely in this one. 23 crewmen makes for a lot of NPCs in this adventure. I really like that the adventure provides an illustrated manifest of the entire crew. This is so helpful, but to make full use of it, I strongly recommend that GMs print out a copy of that crew manifest for each player, so players can refer to it during the game and take notes and cross out people when they die. Otherwise, this adventure can get a little confusing for the players just because of the sheer size of that crew. I'll also point out here that there are no women on the crew, since the author says in the text that he did his best to pull from actual history of whaling ships. And there were occasionally women on whaling vessels, usually like the wives of the officers. So if this bothers your player group, it's okay because it's easy enough to swap in some women without materially impacting the adventure. And if you want, you can check the link in the description below. I created some portraits of women that kind of fit the style of this adventure, just to make it a little bit easier for the groups that want to run a slightly alternate history version of this adventure. The adventure begins with a rousing hunt for a whale. The ship hasn't had much luck in 13 months of being out on the ocean, so when they spot a whale on the horizon, the entire crew is excited. This is a fun action scene, which kind of sets the mood for the adventure. It engages the players and usually ends with a lot of cheering. This scene isn't really critical to the adventure, and in fact, if your group has a problem with hunting whales as an action piece, you can kind of skim through it or skip it without much impact to everything else. But I think it does a great job pulling everybody in and catching everybody's attention so early in the adventure. And the scene ends after they've caught the whale or it's escaped, it doesn't matter, with one of the characters weirdly seeing the ghost of his mother talking to him from the waves, one of many visions that will start to haunt the PCs throughout the course of this adventure. Soon after the players are done with the hunt, one of the crewmen, Valentine Thomas, is very upset. It seems that his prized crucifix has gone missing from his quarters. In fact, all of the crucifixes, crosses, and Bibles on the ship are gone. Now, the players don't know this yet, but these items were tossed overboard by Steward Lawson Bond, one of the conspirators who's helping Captain Chapel return to Ryla. Acting off of terrible 19th century prejudices, Bond blames Orangi, one of the crew who's one of the few non-Christians on board the ship. Orangi was sick the day of the hunt, and soon the crew gets very upset at him and empties out his quarters. And in it, they find a wooden idol, a crude carving of Cthulhu himself, though Orangi seems kind of unaware what the thing really is. To him, it's just something he picked up at a local market. By the way, as a GM, you should totally try to find or make or 3D print a crude Cthulhu idol and dramatically slam it on the table at the right moment. This will freak your players out and it'll have them staring at it the whole adventure until someone just undoubtedly throws it overboard. But in a sort of twist, this idol is actually a red herring, and it doesn't really do anything in the adventure other than set up this initial conflict between Orangi and the crew, who are now starting to think about him as some like idol-worshipping heathen. So this scene between Orangi and Bond and the crew can play out in lots of different ways, with the PCs either settling everybody down or harassing Orangi for being a cultist of some sort. He's not, though. During the debate of what to do with Orangi and where the Bibles went, Captain Chapel makes his appearance, and he of course sides with Bond, who's one of his co-conspirators. So this scene is really all about role-playing, setting up some distrust among the crew, and forcing the players to make some interesting moral decisions on how to handle this crisis. Now, it's very important here for the players to realize that something weird is going on at this point on the ship. You have to play up the relationship between Captain Chapel and Bond here, so the player's spidey sense starts going off. Like, have these two characters like stare at each other with like knowing looks, or even use code phrases that implies that the disappearance of the Bibles and the crosses was a willful act that the captain fully knew about. Hey Bond, did you You have to play up that these two men are up to something at this point, because if the players don't start to think that the captain is up to something sinister here, the rest of the adventure just won't play out with the paranoia and tension that it deserves. Like, you want players to feel unsettled that their captain may not be somebody that they can trust. So really play it up, have the men hang out with each other over the course of the adventure, whisper to each other, and give each other knowing smiles through the rest of the adventure. The following night, as the whole ship is asleep, a sea spirit shows up and possesses one of the PCs, the player playing Matthew Cole, one of the crewmen. Matthew Cole then sleepwalks and attacks somebody else. In fact, the adventure strongly suggests that the poor victim is another one of the players. This whole scene is really cool. Like, the person being attacked is dreaming and doesn't realize what's going on. He just thinks he's getting attacked by like some kind of sea witch, scraggly haired, like trying to choke him. And in reality, it's not. It's actually Matthew Cole. And so the chances that the player survives this attack is almost nil. They can try to fight back, but honestly, the possessing spirit who's got control of Matthew Cole is so strong and does so much damage, it's probably going to kill that player, which is why you have backup characters. So when everybody else in the morning wakes up, you have one dead PC and another one, Matthew Cole, who's like this unwitting murderer who only has a foggy memory of what happened. He doesn't think he did it. And so this sets the entire crew like furious. Like somebody died, somebody's a murderer, they don't know who it is. Even the player may not know that he did it. So there's a funeral, which is creepy and not theologically accurate. And now a good portion of the crew wants the PC who murdered somebody dead. And this is a really fun next section of the adventure because the GM can try to kill off Matthew Cole creatively. Like he can get questioned by the other crew, and then maybe he can suffer a weird accident set up by them, or just get cornered and attacked and thrown overboard by another angry crewman. Or even tried and ordered hanged by the captain, who will be delighted to do it to get his second victim. Meanwhile, as the ship nears the location of Ryla, the entire crew is starting to hear voices, and they're getting more paranoid and aggressive. So even if the player who's playing Matthew Cole somehow survives longer than expected, then one of the crazier crew members can attack somebody else. Either way, soon there is a second dead body on the ship and another unusual funeral. By the way, once there are two casualties, the adventure even allows for one of the players to use the captain or one of his co-conspirators as replacement characters. Now, this can be a little tricky because you're now inserting an antagonist into your player group, and there's a good chance that your players already suspect the captain and some of his cronies as being suspicious. So it's not like doing this is going to set up like a surprise betrayal, but it is kind of a cool twist you can put in the adventure to really mix up the dynamics of your group. Now, when I've done this adventure, this didn't happen, but I asked my friend, Keeper Jeff, who's run full Fathom 5 at conventions many times now. And he said he does do this. He said if you're going to do this, then only do it in the last hour of the adventure so the party doesn't split up too much. And try to pick one of the less obvious conspirators. Since there are 3 of them, plus the captain, there's bound to be at least one of them that the players don't fully suspect of being involved in this plot. So give that character to one of your players. And limit this to just one conspirator in the party, otherwise the whole adventure is gonna like flip on its head midway through, and you're gonna have a group of bad guys running the ship, which is just probably too jarring of a change in the middle of an adventure. Soon after the second death, however it happens, the captain and his conspirators lock themselves up in his cabin, preparing for their imminent arrival to Ryla. But this doesn't go unnoticed. A very upset and traumatized cabin boy runs to the PCs and tells them that he listened at the door of the captain's quarters and he heard that the captain was, quote, making a pact with the devil. Now, this accusation gives the PCs an excuse to either charge the captain's quarters or try to break in sometime later, where they'll find all kinds of goodies, such as firearms and weapons, and the ship's final destination on a navigation chart, which seems unusual because there's nothing there, and a battered copy of a spell book that can call upon Mother Hydra in case your players want to summon an elder god and try to negotiate another deal that won't end up with them all killed. I do wish the adventure provided a little more details on what happens if the players start delving into the dark arts themselves. There's really not a lot of guidance for GMs on what to do if they decide to do that. Now, none of my players ever tried to summon Mother Hydra and ask for her help to escape their predicament, but if it happens, my suggestion is that the GM just kind of allow the players to strike another dark bargain with the dark gods. Like, she might say, all right, if a 4th person is slain, then she'll promise that her minions won't harm them during this voyage, or something like that. Like, Mother Hydra won't do any favors without costs after all, so make those costs pretty high and try to like involve the death of other people on the crew so that the players have to make a tough moral decision about whether to side with Mother Hydra or not in case they decide to summon and bargain with her. Okay, so with the captain's plan finally exposed, the tension rises to a peak, and it's very likely that this adventure will now see its third death. There's just so much chaos in play in the last part of this adventure. There's firearms, there's desperate conspirators, there's the sense that the ship is heading someplace dangerous, and there's lots of crew that are beginning to lose their minds, so there's a 99% chance that your players will do something boneheaded here and get either themselves or another person on the crew killed. When I played in this adventure, my character strongly suspected one of the co-conspirators, Bond, of trying to hijack the ship. I didn't have a full grasp of the plot, but I knew that he was a bad guy and up to no good. So I actually snuck up on him, picked him up, and threw him overboard while he was on watch. And I was so pleased with myself. I even rolled an extreme success, and the keeper described how Bond's skull shattered on the side of the ship and then sunk out of sight. I was like high-fiving the other players, but little did I realize that in killing Bond off, I killed off the third of the 3 crewmen that had to die, and I set up the entire endgame of the adventure. Oh, you fellows can congratulate me later on that. Wait, what? Ugh. With the third onboard death, the Herald of Ryla appears. It rises from the ocean, and it can take several forms. It can look like the possessing corpse of the third victim, or to the captain, it looks like his dear departed beloved father, or to everyone else, it could be an angelic being. It just kind of depends on your character's sanity at this point. But like all Lovecraftian heralds, this guy is bad news. He congratulates the conspirators on making it back to Ryla, and suddenly the pillars of Ryla, those black spires, like rise up from the deep, and in doing so, they crack the hull of the ship and start causing it to sink. Sirens and undead bodies of the deceased crewmen like come to life and crawl up onto the deck of the ship, and unholy chaos just completely breaks out. The crew of the Barclay are either driven completely mad at this point, or throw themselves in glorious worship of the Herald, or they start running for the lifeboats. The Herald soon returns to the sea and starts showing visions of Cthulhu and Ryla to the conspirators, which of course drives them completely insane. So the finale can kind of play out just any which way at this point. It typically, in my experience, plays out with the PCs making a desperate attempt to save their lives, like take command of a lifeboat and row away from Ryla as fast as possible. And in my experience, as well as when I've talked to other GMs who've run this adventure, very few of your players are going to survive this final encounter, which is perfect for a Call of Cthulhu one-shot. When I first played in this adventure, my character actually went mad and dove in after the Herald, trying to swim to Ryla himself and see Cthulhu, and another player died fighting the undead on the vessel, and 2 more took command of a lifeboat and started rowing away from the ship, and they rescued my character before I drowned myself. It was like an epic finale that just felt so good and climactic after a couple hours of just moodiness and role-playing and suspicion. Great ending. And in a playful Lovecraftian twist, any surviving sailors are picked up a few days later by another vessel, which turns out to be bound towards Innsmouth. Yeah, the author clearly inserted some fan service here at the end and even includes a sea shanty. But hey, it feels like a fun post-credit sequence on an otherwise really strong adventure. And that's full Fathom 5. It's like HP Lovecraft and Herman Melville had an RPG baby together. Okay, that's a little weird, but there's just so much compelling about this adventure. A moody and unique setting, so much variability with the players and the characters that they get to play, and a really strong finale. And the author's attention to detail is truly stunning. Like, you can tell that he really studied his whaling lore and includes lots of little tidbits about life on a whaling ship, the slang the sailors would use, and details on how the boat operated. This isn't just an adventure casually set in the 19th century, but everything about the world of Full Fathom 5 feels like an authentic, precisely detailed, and real portrayal of life aboard a whaling ship in 1848. The detail here is just incredibly impressive. Now that does mean that the more the GM preps for this adventure, the better it will go. Immersing yourself with the details of the Barclay and its crew is going to make this adventure run that much better. You really do need to read this adventure a few times and jot down some notes on the NPCs. Like, take one of those manifest sheets for yourself as a GM and write a few words for each NPC's personality so you don't have to like flip back and forth through the adventure during play. And master a few of those whaling slang words so you can whip them out naturally during the session.
Boys, get that whale tied to the fluke chain bit and start carving up some Bible leaves. Quickly, quickly, quickly!
The rich texture of this adventure and the need for prep also means that the adventure probably isn't the best for newer GMs. There's just a lot of moments in the adventure where you'll have to improvise or switch between characters or push events a certain direction without making your players feel like they've lost agency. And it's probably also not good for newer players either, because this is the kind of adventure where if the players don't take action or enjoy role-playing with NPCs versus just making persuade rolls, then the adventure will kind of just run from event to event, just kind of happening until the captain's plan succeeds and the ship sinks and everyone dies. And this is a fair criticism of the adventure. It is largely on rails, or rudders. The players are all on a ship, circling the ocean in one location. There's nowhere else for them to go. And while there's some variability on who dies, the deaths have to happen. Like 3 deaths have to happen for the adventure to conclude with anything that resembles a satisfying ending. And any big action on the player's part in the beginning and middle of the adventure, for example, trying to cause a mutiny on the ship or trying to sail somewhere else, is naturally going to fail, or else the adventure just isn't going to conclude in the right way. But while the actions of this adventure are fairly linear, like it'll always kind of begin and end in the exact same place no matter who runs it, the role-playing opportunities are very much open-ended. And I really like this. There are so many little moments over the course of the adventure where the players do have impact on the flow and the story. So, for example, at the very beginning, like, do they stand up for the falsely accused Orangi and risk the entire crew getting really angry at them? Do they get Orangi as an ally, or do they make themselves enemies just right away? Like, this one decision is gonna make the rest of the adventure play out differently. And once they start identifying the conspirators, like, what do they do about it? Do they spy on these men? Do they dare go up against the captain himself? Again, like, these little decisions that the players make are gonna make this adventure really play out differently. But I will admit that a lot of the openness and agency in Full Fathom 5 is for the people who enjoy role-playing versus the players who have a more pulp action sensibility to their horror games. Players who want to grab a harpoon and lead a mutiny and sail to Rarotanga are going to be disappointed. There's not really a path for that type of play here. But as long as you know what you're getting into, Full Fathom 5 totally delivers. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more reviews like this one, go ahead and harpoon those like and subscribe buttons. And if you've played in Full Fathom 5 or run it, let me know how it went. I would love to hear stories about how your crew triggered the appearance of the Herald and how they eventually escaped, or if they did it all. I think there's many, many ways this adventure could go there at the end, so let me know in the comments below what your experience was like. Until next time, I'm JC, and just remember, Cthulhu died the first time because he was rammed in the head by a boat. That doesn't mean he's gonna fall for it again. So if you see him, just hop off your ship and start swimming.
Mm.